Hello, travelers. Welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For over 20 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens, all through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's live stream event. Today, we're kicking off a new virtual exchange expedition to Costa Rica with explorer Colin Heinrich. Colin is the Global Impact Manager at Indigare, and he's joining us live today to preview his upcoming journey to Costa Rica. I've added the link to Colin's first virtual exchange article to the chat. Check it out on the right side of your screen. And if you haven't already read it, make sure you take a read. It's an introduction to Colin and where he's going and what we expect to find. So I also want to welcome the teachers and students who are joining us live today. Please feel free to use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here, where you're joining from, and of course to share any questions you have for Colin as we go. Throughout this exchange, you'll be able to share your questions with Colin, and hopefully he'll find some really interesting answers in Costa Rica. But all right, without further ado, I think it's time to get to Colin's expedition to Costa Rica and get this journey underway. Colin, welcome back to Reach the World.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here again. Hi,
kids.
It's
great to see you. Great to have you back. So you are just about to set out on another expedition. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah. So this is my third Reach the World expedition. If any of you kids recognize my face, you may have seen me when I went to Antarctica in 2019 and when I went to Indonesia in 2020. So I've always been really drawn to these far off, wild places where there's not very many people. And Costa Rica was a natural choice for my next destination. Because for one, it is the same kind of place with a massive amount of wildlife. National Geographic, if you're familiar with the magazine, it's a very wonderful publication that has tons of great pictures of wildlife and articles about all of that. They've called Costa Rica one of the most intense biodiversity locations in the entire world. And biodiversity means just the number of different kinds of animals and plants in one location. So I'm going to be heading over to Costa Rica to check out some of that. I'm going to be going on some really wonderful hikes. I'm going to be meeting some really wonderful people, seeing how they live. And that's another big part of the trip is, so for my work, I handle the sustainability aspects, which means that I focus on making sure our company doesn't contribute to global warming. I make sure that the people that are less advantaged than we are here in America, I make sure that the people that go to visit Costa Rica are doing so to help those people as well. And so when I go to Costa Rica, I'm going to be learning about the needs of those people. I'm going to be learning about the needs of the wildlife there to protect it and to help elevate the people there and see what I can do to help and what all of us can do to help and what you can do to help.
Awesome. That sounds so exciting. I'm personally very excited to follow you on this journey and see what sorts of things you discover. Let's back up for a second because we just published your first article for this virtual exchange. And for students who are not familiar with you, in the first article, which I've shared the link to in the chat, you introduce yourself and you sort of talk about how you became an avid traveler, an avid explorer, someone who's really interested. It was a very obvious theme in your in that article that you love wildlife. Every photo I saw, you're interacting with some cool new animal or environment. How did you get interested? How did you get to where you are today? What sort of interests and passions are you following?
Yeah, so I'm from San Diego. And when I was a kid, my parents would take me to the San Diego Zoo all the time. And if any of you have ever been lucky enough to go to San Diego or go to the San Diego Zoo, or if you never have, the San Diego Zoo is very large and it has almost every single kind of animal you can imagine there. And so when I was young and growing up, I would travel to the zoo and explore, and I just became enamored by all the wildlife that I would see there. And ever since then, I've wanted to do something that would be to help animals like that. And the San Diego Zoo, it does a lot of work for conservation, it's called. And if you've never heard that word before, conservation means helping to protect things that exist right now. So that can be wildlife, that can be animals, that can be nature in general. And so when I was young, I thought that I was going to work at the San Diego Zoo. And as I grew older and learned more about the world, I realized that there was a lot that I could do outside of the United States. And so I started traveling, and I went to Asia, and I went to Australia, and I went to Africa, and I went to Antarctica eventually, as you've seen. And in all those places, there's animals that need protection, and there's wildlife that needs protection, and there's people that live in those places that can be empowered or taught to protect those animals and nature. So I decided that that was the way that I wanted to get involved. I wanted to travel the world and learn about what these people need and how to teach them and how to teach people here that go to visit them. And that's how I wound up at Indigare. And I've been at Indigare for 6 years now. And Indigare is a travel company here in New York, and we plan travel for people. So if somebody wants to go on a trip to Costa Rica, they'll let me know, and I will tell them the best way to go on that trip. I will tell them where to stay and what activities to do. And after 4 years of that, I was finally able to move my job into something that was more focused on the sustainability aspect and conservation. And now what I do is I travel around the world and I tell people when they're going on those trips what they should do to help make those countries better places.
Can you give us a couple examples of things that people can do while traveling to help the places they're visiting? Usually you hear stories about travelers who are, trampling plants, or, like bringing lots of people to a place that's kind of fragile is always risky. How can travelers help and improve the world as part of their travel?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think the best way to make sure you improve the world is very basic, and it starts with you. And that's just to travel with curiosity. So when you go somewhere, have the desire to learn about those places. Have the desire to look at something and take it in as it is, without any sense of irony, if that makes sense. And I know that's a tough word to understand, because a lot of adults don't even understand it. But when you see people traveling to places and carving their names into old walls, that's not traveling with curiosity. That's just traveling selfishly. But if you travel and you want to learn about the animals that live there or something like that, then that's doing enough, frankly, because at the end of the day, the very best thing that you can do as a traveler to help preserve something is to just spend your money there, really. I think back to my trip to Indonesia that some of you kids may have joined on, where we went to go see the orangutans. And they're these gorgeous, gorgeous animals, and they're so human-like. And they're living in this big forest. And it's so exciting to be able to walk out into the jungle and see these animals and how they live, and to watch them without trying to touch them and as you may know, some of them touched me, but you don't try to make that happen. You just let it happen if it does. But by going there and seeing that and making it important, you show that those animals have value. And so for Indonesia in particular, a lot of jungle is cut down so that people can grow other things, in particular, something called palm oil. And so by going and traveling and seeing the orangutans and having that curiosity for them, you're showing the people of Indonesia that there is a benefit to saving the orangutans, because people will want to come and see them in the future. And maybe then they don't have to cut down the forest for palm oil. Maybe they'll preserve it and help protect it.
Okay, very interesting. It strikes me that you spent your childhood seeing animals in a zoo, and you've spent so many years after that seeking out animals in their natural habitat. And through your work now, you're helping to preserve those natural habitats so people can see them in the wild, so to speak. What is how does it feel different to see an animal in its natural habitat versus seeing them in a zoo?
Well, I know a lot of people have different opinions about zoos. Some people feel that they're mean to the animals because they're keeping them in such small spaces. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. There's a lot of zoos that don't do as good of work, but the San Diego Zoo in particular is very involved in making sure that their animals are happy. That said, it is always going to feel a little bit less than seeing them in the wild just because it's not wild. You're seeing them in an area that's been designed for them. But you're seeing them in person. And that's the first step to learning how to care about these animals. They're not just something that you're seeing on TV. You're seeing them in person, how they move. And it's a really emotional experience in some cases. But when you see them in the wild, you learn just how small humans really are on the planet. So the example that I might give, and I didn't have Reach the World for this trip, but I went to Rwanda, which is a country in Africa, to see gorillas. And you might have heard of Diane Fossey, who is a good friend of Jane Goodall. Who are two inspirational travelers who have done a lot of work to protect these animals. But the gorillas, when you see them in the wild and you see their family troops and you can get so close to them and they don't mind you, and the female gorillas are just tending to their babies and the adults, the big silverbacks, are just lounging, and it all just feels so similar to the way that we exist in our homes. And it's just so incredible to see. And you realize just how much these animals deserve to have those spaces, just as we deserve to have our own.
That's amazing. I want to ask you one more question before we turn to like what you're actually going to be doing in Costa Rica. One more question about animals, because I know a lot of our audience loves animals. Most people have seen animals in zoo, and I agree that seeing them in zoos is a great way to start really caring about the other living creatures on the earth. We have talked a little bit mostly about larger animals. What sorts of smaller animals do you expect to see? I know when you said biodiversity, that's such a great word. That's going to be a key word in this virtual exchange, because biodiversity means the bigger animals, but also the plants and the bugs and the small things. Is there anything in particular that's a smaller thing in Costa Rica that you're excited to see?
Yeah, I'm just so excited to see bugs. I know a lot of people don't like bugs or find certain bugs to be scary, but when you really get down to it, bugs are just animals doing their thing. And just as you've seen squirrels or cats or cute bunnies running around, the bugs are just running around living their lives too. And so actually just the other day, I have a camera now that can zoom in very close. And I took a picture of this bee that was landing on a flower. And when I looked really closely, I noticed that there was this really beautiful spider that was just milky white, sitting on that flower. And let me show you this picture, because it's so interesting to me, because when you don't expect to see anything that small, or you're not looking for anything that small, you miss it, and you miss something that is ultimately a really, really cool part of life. And so you see this, oh no, it's blurry. Here, let me turn this off. I can fix that really quickly. So if you just look at that picture, there's like a little flower with a bee on it and a big bug. And that's two animals that I was never expecting to see next to each other. And because I looked very closely and I found them, it's just as interesting to me as seeing, monkeys or parrots or anything like that. When I was in Indonesia, we were walking on a path, and when I looked down, I noticed that there was this big millipede that was probably a good foot long, just kind of doing its thing along the dirt. And it's just so interesting to see how many different kinds of animals there are. And like I said, I know that some people find these animals scary, but I think when you start to see them as just another kind of animal living their lives, they become less scary and they become much more interesting to look at.
Absolutely. I know in the next few days you are flying to Costa Rica.
Mhm.
Can you just sort of walk us through where you're going, some of the particular things you're excited to do along the way?
Yeah, definitely. So when I first go to Costa Rica, I'm going to be staying at a hotel on what's called the Papagayo Peninsula. And that's going to be a really gorgeous beach area. And there's some jungle. I'm not going to be doing too much just because it's a long trip and I don't want to, do all the exciting things right at the front. So I'm going to be kind of resting on the beach and just getting over any jet lag that I might have. And then we're going to a town called Las Catalinas, which is what's called a master planned community. And master planned means that before they did anything, they designed the entire community. So they designed where the roads were going to go, what the buildings were going to look like. And that's before they shoved a single shovel into the ground. And so the interesting thing about those master plan communities are that it's a really good opportunity to learn about sustainability because it's a place that took all of that into consideration before they built anything. And so depending on where you live, maybe your community was built bit by bit. I just moved out of New York, and New York is a city that is several hundred years old, which means that every single street already existed. And then when something gets too old, they have to knock it down and build something new. And all the streets don't really make sense because they're all crisscrossing because it didn't need to make sense in the 1700s when it was first built. So there's a lot that cities like that can learn from a place like Las Catalinas in Costa Rica, where they know what they're doing with their wastewater, with their noise pollution, with their light pollution, and all of those things, so that ultimately the whole town can be just as exciting and beneficial as a big city like New York, with none of the drawbacks.
That's amazing. Why is it important in Costa Rica specifically that people are thinking about conservation and sustainability?
Yeah, so Costa Rica is a small country, and that lets it have certain luxuries that we don't in big countries. They don't have a military. They don't need very large cities. They only really have the one, which is San Jose. They have a lot of wild areas, and they've put a lot of importance on protecting those wild areas. So the national motto of Costa Rica is Pura Vida, which means pure life. And so they really do make that an important part of life, where they want everything to be happy and clean and well managed and without worry. And so I think that in a place like America, where so many people have so many worries, it's a good model to look to.
That's fascinating. I can't wait to see and learn more about that as you travel. If you were to get in a car at the top of Costa Rica and drive from the top to the bottom, this is especially helpful visualization for people who live in the Midwest and, see lots of cornfields, or live in a big city and just see sidewalks and large buildings all the time. What sort of geographical features would you encounter if you drove right down the middle of Costa Rica?
Yeah, so in Costa Rica, there's a couple of different biomes, they're called, which are just different kinds of landscapes and animals that live there. So there's something called the cloud forest, which is high elevation rainforest. And because it's a rainforest, there's so much water, but because it's so high up, that water turns into clouds. And so it's always super misty and mysterious. And you always think that there's going to be some kind of Sasquatch around every corner. There's also lovely beaches. And so when you're driving, there's just beautiful white sand and blue water and palm trees everywhere. There's big cities like San Jose, but it's the one big city. There's swamps with lots of water inland, and who knows what kind of animals inside there. You can't drive your car through it. You have to just kind of either walk or swim or something. So there's just a lot of different landscapes, and it's all very tropical and filled with life.
All right. What are you most excited to do while you're in Costa Rica?
I know I said I was really excited about the bugs and everything, but I'm so excited to see all the monkeys. Those are they're so fun to watch, and we don't have them in America. So I'm really excited to wake up in the morning and there's an animal there called the Howler Monkey. And it's called the Howler Monkey because it's so loud. You can hear it from over 2 miles away or something like that. And so it's kind of the alarm clock of Costa Rica. I'm going to be waking up to that every morning.
Well, that is certainly an exciting type of alarm clock for all of us who woke up this morning to a beeping phone or a beeping clock of some kind. I don't know. It might seem might take some getting used to waking up to that sound coming from all around you. But what an exciting experience. I feel so lucky that Reach the World is going to get to come with you, and that you're willing to share that experience with students. So I'm going to wrap it up there. This is a great introduction to your journey you're about to have. We're just getting started. For all the students and teachers who are joining us today and are interested in following Colin as he goes on this grand adventure to Costa Rica, learning about sustainability and conservation. We're going to have articles. We're going to reconnect with Colin when he's in Costa Rica so we can take a look around right by his side. All of that is coming up. Colin, thank you so much for joining us today for this great preview. Teachers, you can be the first to know about upcoming video calls and articles from Colin in Costa Rica by completing the free educator registration, which I've added the link to the chat. So click through that. We'd be happy to have you join this journey with Colin. And Colin, we'll talk to you again soon. And until then, safe travels.
Sounds good. I'm so glad that you all are coming with me on this trip. And the next time you speak to me, I will be in Costa Rica.
Fantastic. Can't wait. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.